thank you for being, both of you, for being strong representations for the future of female leaders, female employees, female brokers. These are two wonderful examples that I hope that next generation that I'm definitely not a part of, because I'm still putting things on tape, that can look to the two of you, and then I can share my platform with you. Welcome back to Connected Conversations. This is our special summer season. There was nothing more that I liked as a kid than those special summer episodes released of my favorite TV show like 90210. And that's what we're trying to do here with this little mini season of Connected Conversations. And today I'm fortunate to bring to you two of my all-stars, two of my favorite guests from past seasons of Connected Conversations. We have Anya Ostry from CBRE. We have Christina Clark now from Newmark. I am so happy to have them here so that we could talk about what the heck is going on with commercial real estate. So ladies, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your summer to talk to me.
Thanks for asking me back. Excited to be with Anya and, talk about our different perspectives and how we see the similar things.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been labeled an all-star since I was playing softball and up on the 14 and under all-stars.
What about the beauty pageant?
Well, yeah, but you weren't called an all-star back then. You were just.
I don't know these things. I'm not out going to the Barbie movie like some people.
Yes.
So the theme of this little mini summer season is I think we're in a very weird, we go from one weird time to another weird time to another weird time. And I think with the macroeconomic climate, with what we're seeing with corporations, unfortunately laying some folks off, and the thing that keeps driving this little mini season for me is these utilization reports that I'm seeing. One of which that I've mentioned a couple times before from CBRE, talking about standard utilization being less than 60% and occupiers now accepting that, to where these buildings are sitting half empty. What is going on being two influencers in the commercial real estate space, really with these numbers where they are? What are you seeing? And I'm going to start with you, Anya, and then we'll go to you, Christina, afterwards, just kind of the way my boxes lay out on the screen. So Anya, what are you seeing with these utilization rates and particularly corporate real estate being so low?
Yeah, so I just heard that Castle released some numbers a few weeks ago, and I think the average utilization in an office building, to your point, was about 50%. It's sort of interesting because we're having to really educate our clients, because our clients are seeing the big headlines of either companies are forcing people back or they're seeing these negative headlines around buildings being empty. But I still am seeing a flight to quality. So I give Newport Beach as an example. Fashion Island is our premier mall here in Newport Beach. It's owned by the Irvine Company. And there's a number of office buildings within what's called Newport Center.
I know it.
Newport Center is generally 96% leased right now. That's where I wish our CBRE office was. And so having to explain to a tenant that I represent in Newport Center that it's competitive and that they're holding rates, and then having a conversation with someone about the suburbs of Chicago, they're two wildly different conversations. I was almost depressed driving through the suburbs of Chicago because there's just so many of these large campuses that have been completely vacated. McDonald's used to be my customer in the suburbs, and that campus is now vacated and moved to. I mean, there's been a number of these companies that have just said, yep, no thanks in these suburban markets. One thing I'm seeing, again, flight to quality, and then also micro markets. So there are parts of New York and Denver, where you live, Bob, that are performing relatively well. Like they're vibrant, there's business there. A lot of companies that are maybe 1 to 2 locations, they've sort of been in the office because their flow was always that they were working together. But what I'm seeing from the larger occupier sentiment is that Managers have not, a lot of HR departments have given managers the opportunity to decide how their employees are going to return to the office. And they didn't have a great flow pre-pandemic, how they were managing being together and working collaboratively. And so now in this new environment, they're just not able to necessarily get it together and actually create that flow where people are feeling like, yeah, I want to come to the office 3-4 days a week.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that from a very influential head of employee experience, how you have to have that plan. Christina, what are you seeing?
Yeah, well, I agree with a lot of what Anya said. Also, just stepping back to more of the macro view that you were leading in with, companies are right sizing from how many employees they have, how much they're spending. Facebook is announcing earnings, I think, after the bell today, and it's, the year of efficiency. How do we lean out? What are we doing differently? We've seen them give up space, let go of employees, reduce costs, redo their spend. The Fed is also, the interest rates have changed so much, and the cost of capital. How much are you building out? What are you doing? So all of that ends up impacting how are we using our actual office space and the desks we're sitting in today, et cetera. But I think it starts at the very big macro level of what are company goals. In almost every headline about public companies reporting right now, the comment is, what's the free cash flow? And for us to move into office space or industrial space or lab space, we are spending cash that costs money more now than it did before. And that is affecting everything. I absolutely agree with the flight to quality. When companies are deciding to move, not only are they moving to a better space or the other side of the street or into the South Financial District versus the mid-market or something in San Francisco, they're also moving typically to less space. So our vacancy is going to continue to go up over the next couple of years as companies like you just mentioned, McDonald's and a bunch of others, not only are they changing their location, they're changing their footprint, their size, and how they use the space. It used to be pre-pandemic, often companies had 3 seats for every employee. You had their desk, you had a conference room, and then you had a cafe. We don't need 3 seats. Maybe we even need 1. So if we can reduce down to 1/3 of where we were, that greatly impacts like net absorption and vacancy rates in the cities, which then impacts the building financing, the value of the building, which then impacts the banks. And it's just this continued cycle. So from Wall Street saying we want efficiency, and then back up with people saying we gave you efficiency. Now, what is the building actually worth? Because it is only 30% full. That's the whole cycle that's occurring right now in the market. And we're seeing that impact our tenants. I also agree with what Anya said about educating our clients. They're seeing like all this, there's 30% vacancy in San Francisco, or there's this or that, but the space you want, the it space, there's still demand on the it space. And that chair that everybody wants right now is still going to cost whatever it's going to cost. There isn't a deal for everything. And so that there is that additional education that if you want all of the A's, you're going to pay for A quality.
Christina, I have a question for you too, not to hijack. This is Bob's podcast.
Hijack it.
So one of the other things I'm noticing is landlords are starting to make decisions. And what I mean by that is I think we were sort of in this like wait and see what happens, just like tenants kick the can down the road. We're seeing tenants make decisions now on the type of footprint that they're going to obtain. But landlords also are saying, okay, I'm a landlord, I got 50 buildings, and I know 3 of these are in tertiary markets that are 20% occupied. I may just throw the keys back on those buildings and then spend the precious capital that I have on a few buildings that are in quality submarkets where there's activity to attract those tenants, like you say, who want that amazing space, even if it's less of the space, but just the fact that they want that environment and they want the amenities, they want the Class A aspect.
Yeah, I think the flight to quality is impacting landlords as well. And if you do have a dozen buildings in your portfolio, are you focusing on one that's in a downtown core that that might come back first? Are you letting go of others? Are you also giving back keys just to renegotiate the transaction and to renegotiate the terms of your loan so that then you can transact? And as far as making decisions, I agree. Some are saying we're going to just dump more money into the building. We still want to do your transaction. We want to start to get cash flow, even though our equity is going to be lower. And those landlords are probably making some smart decisions with strong tenants. And in 3 years, they'll be able to recapitalize that equity and sell the building or sell part of it or get it back. But right now, do you want your building? Can you fill it? And accepting the write down and or waiting for the end 3 or 5 years from now when you can fix the write down and write the building again. But landlords are starting to make decisions. Rents aren't moving as much in some of the big cities as you would expect them to, but they are reaching for transactions. They're maybe giving more free rent, or it's a delayed start. They're doing other things, but trying to keep the face value up, which is, notorious in other countries, in Australia and Sydney. Very often the face rate stays the same, but the percentage of incentives goes up or down significantly, 25 to 50%, versus in the States, traditionally, all the numbers move, right? Rent, free rent, tenant improvement allowance, et cetera. But now people are trying to see, can we keep our face rate up and then move the other levers more?
The NFL does it that way. They incentivize their players, and the contract looks one way, but when you dig into it, actually it's loaded with the incentives or front end loaded or whatever. But besides that, when you guys just sparked a idea in me, so if the landlords and these building owners are forced to make decisions, does also flexible office space like the WeWorks of the world factor into that? Because they're also competing with that, where somebody says, we're just going to take our ball and go over here and play because they have really nice space that includes all the amenities that we need. Is that a factor as well?
Yeah, for my clients particularly, they are very much interested in flex space. And I was just listening to a podcast with Jamie Hadari, who is the founder of Industrious. And I don't know if you all watched that docuseries on WeWork. I loved it. I thought it just reminded me of like living through all of that in 2018 and 2019. But he mentioned that, they're having companies come to them at, Dallas, Denver, some of the major markets saying, I want space for 50 people. I just had a Fortune 500 client of mine say, we're going to do away with our headquarters completely, but we're going to give our client or our employees an on-demand Regis pass where they can just go in. If they want to go into an office, they can go in and rent an office for a day. And that was, obviously I wasn't promoting that. It was something that they, obviously everyone's kind of doing their own research on this flex office stuff. And I was like, wow, that is wild. You're going to go from an HQ situation down to, hey, everyone gets an on-demand Regis pass. And that's
what is their belief in collaboration? Are they going to have intentional times for people to come together?
They will, but they plan to rent spaces like at hotels or through Regis or something like that. And then the other thing was the average tenure of the employee that they had working at HQ was over 10 years. And because they're a global company, people were working sort of strange hours, right? And so they were finding that people coming into the office was less and less. But I will say this, employee sentiment after they were told the office no longer exists anymore was like, whoa, that's something that's now being managed. Because when you tell people they no longer have something, then the fear comes in of like, what's going on with my job? All of that. How am I ever going to get in front of leadership? So all those fears sort of bubble up. But I was really interested to see if they were like, yeah, we're gonna do it this way, and we're fine. So
that's sort of fascinating. I feel like I love having something to do and a place to go do it. And it's nice a few days a week to come into an office and see people and to get mentoring, to give mentoring. There's just so many soft things that happen in an office. I can't imagine being completely 100% remote for me personally. And that's what I'm finding with most of my clients as well. But, it'll be interesting to see how some of these experiments work out. If in 18 months we get back together, and then in 36 months, who's still doing what and why? I do think flex space, to your question, Bob, is really important right now, but the health of the flex providers is also very important. If you look at WeWork stock, if you look at the financing of their buildings, so you put 50 employees, just to throw out the number already used, if you put 50 employees into a WeWork in Chicago, and then WeWork says, oh, actually, we're just going to close that office right now because, we're going to default on that building and we're going to stop paying that lease, et cetera. Or if WeWork goes into bankruptcy, what happens to all the little companies that that WeWork has signed these leases under. I was trying to do a transaction abroad, and a large flex provider kept closing all of the offices. In one city, they closed 3 locations as we were negotiating on them. And the center people that we were negotiating with didn't even know they were being closed, because those decisions are being made at such a high level and with such confidentiality. You can't say to the account manager, hey, we're going to be closing some of the offices in XYZ city, stay away from it. But then my clients, the tenants, we need space for people to go use and maybe present to clients, maybe have offices. Maybe there's something in their contract that requires them to have offices. There's all these reasons to have an office in addition to just collaboration and a place to work, that if you go to swipe your card and your office doesn't open one day, what happens? And that creates a whole bunch of things. Then also our tenants that, the people that Anya and I represent now, are they involved in a bankruptcy case if somebody goes under? And how do they get their deposits back? How do they get, whatever? If you have a bunch of passes, you've often prepaid for those passes every month. So if you have 100 passes and you've prepaid $100, how do you get that money back? Now, if that's not a large number, but if you make that times 1,000 passes or 10,000 passes that some of these companies with large sales organizations have, how do you get that back? So there is the risk with flex space of the stability of the providers. And this has been going on for years. We use WeWork as Kleenex, but yes, Regis has been a company forever. There's flex space is not a new concept. This has always been an important concept. So the health of the flex space providers, also the cost of capital for flex space providers, for them to finance, these chairs or something, and I'm not in a flex space, but these chairs, it costs them more. Their capital costs 0. And now it costs 4, 5, 7%. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing is, because the capital is costing more, how well are they building out the spaces? It was already a struggle with some of the fishbowl flex providers of, can I hear the person next door? Is there confidentiality? Is it daisy chained together? How the electricity works, et cetera, et cetera. So flex is something our clients are demanding, but it's hard to thoughtfully fulfill it as well as you can with the direct office space or a sublease space.
This is exactly now what you just did there. You gave a cautionary tale, right? To where this could be the solution. Meanwhile, you're trying to negotiate in a city where at a much higher level, this company's making a financial decision to close these spaces while your client is like, well, I need space. And it's like the little Dutch boy putting his fingers in the holes in the dam. So with that cautionary tale in mind, what's another piece of advice that both you ladies can give as we look at these different models? Okay, we're going to go to a hub and spoke model. Okay, we're going to get some flexible space over here. What are some of the other cautionary tales you can offer, or words of wisdom you can offer in this climate right now? We'll start with Anya.
Cautionary tale. One thing I've been paying attention to, and this is maybe a little more on the soft side, is just this generation, this Gen Z that's coming into the workforce, right?
Go on.
I'm a millennial. And so for a while, the spotlight was on me, and I love that. Now we're kind of passed over. No one really cares about them. I know Christina's a millennial.
I care.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I was just called a veteran in my, some of the press. I was like, excuse me? Veteran industry broker changes jobs. I was like, wait, that's me? How did I age? What happened?
Wow. Yeah, you're like, I like that, but I don't like that.
Yeah, I wasn't ready. I was emotionally not ready for that word.
But one thing I would say is, I guess, because I've been doing a little bit of research and talking to people about Gen Z and how they want to be mentored. And obviously we get nervous of these groups of people who have come out of school during the pandemic and only know working from home. And what I'm finding is they want mentorship in a different way than maybe Christina or Bob or I did, right? Mm-hmm. They want mentorship in I want to be able to text somebody, or I want to be able to have a meetup every 6 months, where I feel like when I was coming up in the business, I wanted to meet face to face. I wanted access constantly. I feel like this generation is much more reliant on technology, which is probably a good thing. They're a little more elusive on social media. However, they are wanting access to people. And so I just think when companies are making these decisions to just close offices indefinitely in a certain market, I think they need to be cautious about who necessarily that's going to impact on the up and coming side of their organization, and who are the young talent that you want to develop and ultimately you may scare away. I have had a few clients tell me that they've lost employees to companies that are back in the office at least 3 to 4 days a week. And so I think the conversation is starting to happen, but it's been sort of on the back burner the last few years.
Anything to add to
Also,
that?
like, where do you learn, like, where does your watering hole become? I mean, years and years ago, I worked at Gensler, and the conference room 5 was the bar downstairs. Like, I mean, where do you like make your friends and like have a date and just learn how to be social? Also, how do you put your career together if you're completely remote? I think I don't know the statistics on this, but for like the type of work we do, or for learning how to present to executives, or learning what you said wrong in a meeting, or how you could present this way, like so much is drafted off the in-person experience. Mm-hmm. And how do you do that if you've been completely remote your entire career, and you're wearing a polo shirt like Bob, but is he wearing shorts, or is he wearing slacks, or his boxers? Like, what's going on, right? So I just like wonder, like, what is the like other things that come with being in an office that this generation that wants to be, like, my understanding of the generation is they just want to be so free. They want to make choices whenever they want to make choices. They don't want to be labeled. They don't want to be put in a box. They want to have options. But I go back to, how do we have accountability before we just have flexibility? And where does that start and stop? And how do you manage that? I absolutely want flexibility, but we had to have a lot of accountability before we got it. So how do we help them and teach them, but also give them what they're asking, or not? I can say, as a personal story, when I moved to my new office, I was given a couple different private offices to pick from, which was different because I was used to being in open space. And a couple of the millennials, or I guess next generation, Gen Z, is it? Like, they were like, can you sit here so that we can be near you and we can just pop in and ask you questions? And then I was like, oh, well, I was going to turn my office into a conference room, but now that like all of you are going to be coming in, I actually need the space. And it's turned into this place of like constant open door and people coming in and asking questions. So sometimes I think, do they want to be remote and do they want technology? But when they can have a leader in the office and they can ask questions, they actually want to jump in and join a call and see how you're thinking things through and ask questions. So are we saying one thing, but we're just don't have enough experience yet to know that being in person and learning from your boss or your mentor is actually excellent? And we just they don't know that yet.
I agree. Like, personal story for me, the way you described it, Christina, my manager, Larry Turner, who I was just texting the other night, 20 years ago, his team meetings were held in his office. And we would start those meetings with what our weekends were like, because he liked to hear, he had a young staff. He liked to hear, we all lived at the beach in San Diego, and he loved to hear the stories. And we would then get down to business and talk about the weekend and the projects we were knocking out. And it was that sense. And to this day, he's one of my best mentors. And it was that idea of going into Larry's office, Uncle Larry, and having Larry, guide me along, whatever challenge I was having. But it comes down to, like you said, Christina, knowing that leader is going to be there. You then become an anchor. You almost become an anchor of the team of which you're leading. And that also requires space and a place and purpose and all these things that we're hearing. And we'll cover this, we've covered this in other podcasts, but it needs to have a sense of purpose. But you do need those 4 walls, and you do need a place to go to and somebody to talk to. So with all that being said, we talked about something, and Christina, this is something I wanted to come back to and touch on. I was reading a report from Newmark, and it was actually stating that the largest amount of real estate debt in history is coming to maturity over 2023 and 2024, which then leaned into your take on capital expenditures. And where is that money coming from? It's not as readily available as it was in the past. Can you talk a little bit about that, the capital expenditures, how all this debt coming to maturity? We'll start with you and then we'll go to Anya, about how that plays into what we're seeing currently and where things may go in the near future.
Sure. I think we have a ways to go with commercial real estate. There's a lot of talk in the markets these days about are we going to be able to skip a recession? Is it going to be a soft landing? But we have a lot of debt that needs to be renegotiated, in San Francisco, across the country, and globally. And that is, I agree with that stat generally, like we have another couple of years or 18 months of this debt coming to maturity, and we don't have tenants to help finance the buildings to then help refinance the debt. So somewhere along the lines, the banks are going to have to carry some of it, or the government's going to carry some of it, or landlords are going to put more money into a building because they know that in the long run, they might lose out for the next 3 to 5 years. But in the long run, is their equity going to give you the return they need? I'm working on a transaction right now with a very significant credit tenant, and the landlord is going to refinance the building themselves to get the lease done in order to have the tenant in the space, which will then promote more tenants going into the space, and eventually the building will right size itself. But it will take 5 years for them to see that. And over the past decade, all they've seen is immediate returns. You're like, open for business, and here comes money, and it just, tenants fill the space and the rent roll starts and everything's good. So this is a huge shift for landlords, and I might have to sit on my debt for a while and to see the equity returns that I am expecting to have.
Yeah, agreed with Christina. The transaction that I did in the suburbs of Chicago, when we did the math, it was a 10-year deal. The landlord wasn't going to see any returns until year like 8.5. The benefit to them was that it was a strong credit tenant. And so, that's what sold, because if this was just like a mom and pop, I don't know that we would have gotten the deal that we did. Even though, I'd like to believe I'm a good broker, but having a credit tenant in tow is definitely beneficial. I think 100% agree with everything Christina said. And I just think that right now, as tenant reps, like, that is really a big part of our job, is to understand what's going on with these landlords and where their desires lie, what their financial situation looks like, and really being able to leverage that to make a deal that works for both parties. I mean, obviously landlords can't make deals consistently where they're losing money, right? Or if a landlord's close to throwing the keys back, this information is finally out there, and it's out there in a big way. And so I think clients and occupiers should rely heavily on their tenant rep brokers to be able to advise them to steer clear of certain buildings and landlords, and try to make deals work with other landlords.
I totally agree. The occupiers need to be digging into the financials of their current buildings and anything they're looking at going forward. Not only who is the landlord or the operator, who is the lender? What type of loan is it in? When does it mature? What's the debt on it? What is the feeling in it? Is it, a bunch of international money that can maybe recapitalize it? Is it going to be, capital calls that they're not going to be able to fulfill? Does the building need a lot of work? Is there, environmental issues? Like, there's just so many layers that for a number of years we've been able to have awareness of, but less detailed attention on. And now you have to have details. And I completely agree, Anya, about understanding, like, when does the landlord make money? What is that landlord analysis? It's very important to understand how the health of the building and the health of the landlord.
How are they reacting to where it's not it's a longer term payoff? Are they receptive to it, or are you all fighting a battle when it comes to
it? It all depends on the landlord profile, right? Like, I'm finding a lot of them are receptive. And there's a lot of landlords who are in good. I mean, we talk about all the landlords who could be in trouble, but there's also a lot of landlords who don't have a lot of debt on their buildings, and they can sort of do deals, get occupancy up. They've got some cash to improve their assets, and then they can stay put for the next 2-3 years. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I would love to believe at some point there's just going to be this shift where everybody's going back to the office. But at the end of the day, I think there are landlords who are in positions of confidence. And so I think it's very specific to each situation.
And there's still a lot of capital that needs to be deployed. And when capital markets teams go to bid and sell or do a sale leaseback, there's loads of people bidding and bidding up some of the properties because they know that there will be a return on the investment. The press press focuses on the negative. So we're hearing about the building in San Francisco that's, only 75% of it was lost, of the equity was lost. You're hearing about that, but you're not hearing about a headquarters sale leaseback that went for $1 billion and, that everybody won. So there's, we have to remember that the press tilts towards negative.
That's so true. So with all that being said, as we come to close to our time here, I'm going to go to each one of you and you can either give me I love hot takes, whatever. If you want to give me a hot take, a prediction. Anya gave us predictions last year that almost all of them came to fruition. And you can go back and look at the tape. Or the data or whatever it is.
The tape.
I'm old.
You did just age yourself.
Gen X. So
Me too.
So you can go to the tape and see her predictions for the most part all were in line. So Anya, let's see if you can do it again. Hot take predictions. What do you got?
Okay, so my hot takes predictions. So I'm more focused on occupier behavior right now. And one thing I think we're going to continue to see is there's going to be a lot of movement in that head of real estate position. So people are going to continuously move organizations, and it's big game of musical chairs. I talk to at least 2 to 3 people every week who are either looking to make a move or making a move. I feel like for the longest time, these folks have stayed in these roles for 20 to 30 years. That's not happening anymore, whether that's pressure coming from the C-suite or just pressure of like, hey, I need to try something different because I don't want to work for a financial services firm that's sending everybody home and closing offices. So I think that that's a big thing that's going to continue to happen. I do think what I've been seeing over the course of the last year is organizations, obviously we focus on account business. So we sell our services for lease administration, transaction management, facilities management to these larger occupiers. I've seen a big stall in occupiers making decisions, and that's either to retain the provider that they have. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, you're probably seeing it on your side of the business, Bob, and Christina can chime in. I'm seeing them hesitant to make decisions with to keeping their provider or making a change. They're going out for RFP, but then people are coming in presenting and then nothing's happening. So I believe there is, and it's so funny because I hear it on almost every side of the business right now. And there's a lot of frustration, obviously, from us on the service provider side. I do think in the next 6 to 9 months, occupiers are going to get more of that pressure to make decisions. And I do think that a lot of this business is going to shake out how it turns out for us. Bob, hopefully it's fruitful for the two of us and Christina, but I am thinking that's going to change.
I just had a conversation on another episode where they said the same thing. There's a lot of resumes coming across their desks from heads of real estate. Mm-hmm. And it's all about not wanting to have that perception of, poorly utilized portfolio or portfolio that just reduced. So I do agree with that. Christina, your hot take prediction, whatever you want to give to the audience right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree that there's a lot of movement in not just heads of real estate, but within brokerage firms, within people changing their careers, staying within the boundaries of commercial real estate or corporate real estate, but making a role change. It's always easier to change too when the market is a little slower and when it is taking so long to get transactions done. Your list of what you're leaving one place or the other is different than when you're just so busy. I think that's happening. I think in general, like the occupier, it used to be fear of missing out. Did I get enough space? Did I get the deal done? Now it's fear of messing up and not wanting to make a decision or sign too big of a headquarters or sign too small, or there's just this over analysis because we just don't know. The data is being collected right now of how are people going to work? How do we need to be in an office for productivity? Do you have to have in-person collaboration? How much can you be hybrid? It's going to land, the pendulum always swings one way and then all the way the other way. And then we land somewhere in the middle. So I think we're going to come back to, 3-4 days a week in the office and people needing space, people wanting to be together, but people also wanting flexibility on the edges. So I think that's going to happen. And then I think just a reminder to all of us that, nothing is ever as bad or as good as it seems. And the press and the buzz and what's happening with the loans, like these are still beautiful buildings in beautiful cities or beautiful suburbs. I'm in downtown San Francisco where you can't read anything or meet anybody or see anyone where they're not like, oh my God, what's happening in San Francisco? I've been downtown every day last week, every day this week. It is clean. They have, the homeless have been, taken care of. There are, not drugs in the court. Like it's just the word on the street versus the reality as, a woman walking in and out of my office. I don't have fears. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm not stepping over people or things. We absolutely have issues that we need to solve, but, just sort of like remembering to like turn it back a little and like, what's reality versus the buzz that everybody's trying to get in their clickbait. It's beautiful.
That's awesome advice across the board, right? We saw it when we went through the global crisis that I'm not going to rehash, but that's all we heard, right? We heard the gloom and doom. So with that, I'm going to express my gratitude as I always do. Anya, you always, whenever I need to ask a question or need some help with something, you're always willing to help me. And I really, really appreciate it. Christina, you're always so gracious towards me. And I really appreciate you taking your first foray into the podcasting world and multimedia presenting with me. I'm flattered that you trust me that much. And I'm glad that we both have some mutual friends. So thank you so much. And I also want to thank you for both of you for being strong representations for the future of female leaders, female employees, female brokers. These are two wonderful examples that I hope that next generation that I'm definitely not a part of because I'm still putting things on tape that can look to the two of you, and then I can share my platform with you. So before we go, Anya, where can everybody find you? Just kind of drop your info here before we wrap.
You can all find me on LinkedIn and I was going to say my Instagram, but I was like, you do not need to find me on Instagram. They can find me at LinkedIn. I'm at CBRE. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, so I'm always happy to connect. And
Cornet, you're a big Cornet.
I am the vice president of the Cornet chapter for Southern California. I spend a lot of time traveling, so I'm always happy to meet new people. And Bob, I look forward to the next time we can do this. Heck
yeah. Christina, where can everybody find you now?
Yeah, Newmark, Christina.Clark at nmrk.com, on LinkedIn. Text me, tweet me, or X me, or whatever it's called now. It's
don't say that around our mutual friend. Do not say that around our mutual friend. It's Threads now. It's Threads.
This is true. I mean, there's so many ways to reach us. Can we just don't send me another Slack channel. Don't send me another. I can't. Just text me.
So with that said, this is Connected Conversations, our special summer season. I got my two all-stars here with me. I hope everybody enjoyed this conversation. That's Anya Ostry, that's Christina Clark, and I'm Bob Massachetti. This was Connected Conversations. I'll see you all on the interwebs. Thank you.